Shalom, everybody. This is Outcast for Christ Ministries, and I have a revelation and message for the Kingdom Spouse community. This message is for the standers in the Kingdom marriage community, those who have been given a promise of marriage or restoration by God, Yahuwah. This is a prophetic message for the Kingdom marriage community. So, pretty much either at this time right now or recently, maybe not that long ago, God has been testing the standards in the Kingdom marriage community. He's been testing to see if you love Him enough to continue your walk with Christ, even though you may not get your kingdom spouse back. Abraham was very old when he had Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac was his promise of God. Ishmael was a counterfeit. And Abraham had Isaac when he was very old in age. And when God asked him to sacrifice his son to him, I'm pretty sure that he was very sad and grieved in his spirit. But he trusted God enough to go ahead and place him on the altar. And right before his sacrifice, right before he was about to sacrifice him, God presented him with a ram in a bush. Also, in the book of Job, Job was found righteous and upright in the eyes of God. And he was tested by the devil to touch and take everything that Job had. His crops, his health, his children, literally took everything. And Job's wife told him, after everything was taken away, why don't you just curse God and die? Job said, woman, you sound foolish. If we accepted God during the good, we should also accept Him during the bad. Do you trust God enough to place your spouse on the altar before Him and walk away? It's going to look like there is no hope in sight. It's going to look like he's never going to come around. It looks like he's too proud to bend his knee to God and answer the call that God has placed on his life. It looks like he's too proud to even live the life that God is wanting him to live, to submit to God's will instead of his own will. It's looking like the judgment that God has been giving him is not severe enough to make him bend his knee to God. But even Jonah, who was swallowed up by the giant fish in the belly of the whale, after 3 days he repented and went to Nineveh and preached the word to the people of Nineveh, just like God asked him to in the first place. Do you love God enough to continue to serve Him even though it's looking like your spouse will never have a turnaround? Will you continue to love, honor, praise, and worship God even if it looks like your spouse will not submit? Or are you going to get angry at God? Are you going to curse God? Are you going to walk away not only from the promise due to the prolonged waiting period, the delays, but are you going to completely turn your back on God? This is a test that I have had to take several times. Because I was angry with God. And God is also showing you how the enemy attacks. He attacks through your mind. He attacks through your emotions. Your soul is your mind, will, and emotions. That's what your soul is. Your spirit is your inner man. Your flesh is your outer man. Satan can only attack you. He can attack you in all three, but in this particular instance, he's attacking through the soul, your mind, will, and emotions, getting you caught up in your emotions, causing you to walk away from the will of God, to submit to your own will and not the will of God, to turn your back on God, to get angry at God, and to curse God. But do you love God enough to put your spouse on the altar before him and walk away? If not, your spouse has become an idol. And God is a jealous God, and he shall have no one before him. So in this time, or maybe this is something that has just recently happened, or it could be possibly something that you're about to go through, it's a test. It's a test to see if A, you are idolizing your spouse, or you're idolizing the promise. And then also B, do you love God and trust God enough to continue to serve him, honor him, worship him, serve him without the promise of your God-ordained spouse? Or are you going to curse God? It's a pruning season. He's pruning and he's testing. And I'm speaking from experience, because I've had to take this test multiple times, several times, at least 3. But the Bible says that he will restore the years that the locusts have eaten. Everything that Job had taken away, God doubled. He lost 10 children, God gave him 10 more. He doubled his land. Do you love God enough to continue to be obedient to him, even though what he is asking you to do is very uncomfortable, and it may be the exact opposite of what you were expecting? The devil has to have permission. He has to ask God for permission to try you and to test you. But everything that the devil meant for evil, God will turn it around for good. So, lay your spouse on the altar before the feet of God, and let God have his way with your spouse, so that when he comes back, he will be completely submitted to God. That may look different for a lot of people. That may look like no communication. That may look like blocking them on social media so that they cannot constantly watch you and monitor you. However, God speaks to you in your own situation, because all of our situations are different, but also at the same time very similar. Do you love God enough to put him on the altar before him and give him up the same way Isaac was going to give up the same way Abraham gave up Isaac before God? This is a quick prophetic message for the God-ordained community. It's Outcast for Christ. I hope this message reaches those who need it the most, because God has a way of speaking to certain people through the algorithm on social media platforms. Take this message back to God. Let him minister to you. Let him speak to you concerning this message. Do you love God more than your God-ordained spouse, or do you love your God-ordained spouse more? Do you love the promise of marriage more than God? It's a heart issue, heart posture. He's testing your heart posture, and to see if this has become an idol. Take this message back to God. It's Outcast for Christ. Shalom.